I guess we are live right now. So I got 6 day old coffee in this thing. So I'm gonna be drinking my new LaCroix Black Raspberry Natural Essence spring water.
You know what that is? That's just seltzer with like a splash of grape juice in it.
I thought it was the water that they sent through the beer, and after the carbonation process, they take it out and put it in these things and sell it to me for $1 a can.
I don't know. My kids love them. What's on the agenda for today, big fella? I think that one's
old. So look at Greg is out first. Everybody, welcome to Materials Exchange Live with our This Week in Lumber with Matt Beamer from Hampton Lumber. Greg Riley is usually riding along with us. He is on a kite over to Hawaii to go to a wedding. Aloha and mahalo, Greg, if you're watching. So it was interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit today. You and I basically chatted last night a little bit. I talked to Greg. I was going back and forth on emails and IMs and chats and LinkedIn on personal deals with everybody talking market, right? So it's crazy, man. I mean, you and I talked till like 10 o'clock last night, just BS, and had a good time, right?
There's a lot of moving parts right now is the bottom line, right?
Man, so let's, you know, I kind of read you this email from this guy the other day, and it made a lot of sense. Like basically said my, you know, he saw a lot of specialty OSB showing up yesterday, which we saw weeks ago, which is a precursor to other OSB probably coming on. It's probably no secret at this point that there could be something there, people looking for orders on OSB and plywood, but who knows? But that was one thing. And he said his old man started in the business. He said his old man. I didn't call his dad his old man. So, in 1965, and always used to tell me lumber leads all markets. It certainly led a lot of other products this time around, but now where is it leading us? Thanks, Mike. Was this really COVID related, and are we coming to earth? This is what the Fed chair testified last week when he defended not raising rates. He said, Ash, I have no idea. I'm in Greg's camp of sticking to a strategy. We are busy. There's no end in sight. So I've been buying a little every day, and I'm fully prepared to dive into. And you know what? You and I had that conversation. I mean, look, you can get these inklings and these feelings on stuff, but you look at the business that you have, you call people that you know real well, you look at everything happening around you, and you make decisions. There's all kinds of people out there that say, that put things out saying you got to buy now, you got to do this. None of us at the end of the day really know what's going on. I mean, no. we have more information and better information than others and experience, and we can make decisions on that. But trying to be a hero and picking a top and a bottom in a market, sometimes we have fun doing it, right? Greg did pretty darn good on that one a month ago. But like you and I talked about in here last night, we're starting to see some signs of some more buying. And I mean, look at today, if I would have come in today and you would have said the futures would be down $40, I would have said, I don't know where it's going to be. Is it surprising? I don't know, but there's a lot of buying going on in the cash market out there. I mean, you can share as much or as little as you want. You had a good point. Like mills are trying to build an order file right now, and it's not just on one species, it's on everything in lumber.
Right.
Their first concern is to go out and take the volume and the best orders they can get, and at the best number they can get, and they do that. And your experience was, you know, you've seen that happen, and as you go back every day to ask for different things, the better deals aren't as good anymore. Does that make sense?
Right. Some of the deals that were out there on Monday aren't available today.
Yeah.
Which means that somebody came in and bought something on Monday and established kind of a floor price. And then on Tuesday or maybe later Monday, somebody sold some more at that price or maybe even a little higher. But it solved the mill's problem on that particular item. So let's just say it's 2 before random, 2 and better. And some guy came in and made a 30-car offer, and they said yes. And so then the next guy came in a few hours later and made a similar offer, and they maybe said yes. And then the next guy comes in and they say, no, we sold it. So that's what's happening right now as we speak. But I don't even want to get it. I don't even want to go that far with the nooks and crannies of how lumber gets transacted. I think most of the people watching this and most of the people in our industry have been around long enough to recognize what's happened, what's happening right now. I just want to talk about risk. So at $1,800, there was a lot of risk in the market, right? If you were buying a lot of $16, $17, $18, $2,000 lumber, you were taking massive risk, the highest risk level you've ever taken in our business. Now that we've gone down to like 700 mil, 800 mil, 600 mil on some items, there's hardly any risk left. I mean, what's your downside now? $200? We can manage $200 worth of risk pretty easily with futures hedges and selling strategies. And we've built our entire careers on $100 to $200 risk. That's normal for everybody. So I'm back in the boat of thinking, well, I've got about $200 downside risk at this point. I don't have $1,400 downside risk. I don't have $1,600 downside risk. I've got $200 downside risk, $300 maybe at the tops. I'm willing to take that risk. I think that's a smart move. It's just my opinion, but I don't have any reason not to engage at this point. You know, they've wrung out all the decision making for me. They just dropped the price of my product lines by like $800 to $1,000 per thousand. You're talking $90,000 to $110,000 per rail car. I don't have to worry about anymore. And now I'm like, I can engage again. I can deal with $200 risk, $300 risk. We can manage that.
Yeah, I think the risk is one thing. The volatility is the thing that's hard to deal with, right? And
it works both ways. We always talk about, you know, hey, we just lost $800 or $1,000. Well, there was your volatility. But what if it went back up to $300? You know, I mean, that wouldn't surprise anybody either. What we've just come through in the last year, $100 swing could happen in a day.
Yeah, the crazy thing is, you know, we always say markets always do what hurts the most amount of people the most. That could be, you know, what if the price just sat here now and didn't do anything and traded sideways for the next 6 months?
Would it shock you?
No. Well, I mean,
would anything shock you?
So what would shock me is if the prices went to the cost of production, right? That would shock me, and I think that would shock everybody. And
what do you think the cost of production in Canada is right now?
I think it's certainly a hell of a lot higher in Canada with their stumpage costs now than what people,
500 that it used to be.
Yeah, than what people normally thought of, right? Because everybody thinks of what they heard 2 years ago, right? I think in the South it's probably the lowest cost still, but the volatility is nuts. Like you come in and people love talking about futures, even though most people don't trade them, right? But like, oh, we were up 60 and now we're down 60. Well, that just scares people, right? Sometimes,
yeah.
And you know,
it is hard to deal with that kind of volatility on the futures board if you do trade futures, and I do trade futures, and so I've been really aware of it. It can work in your favor and it can work against you. I've had hedges on inventory that I lost $500, $1,000 on, you know, back in May on the May contract. I had to eat $500 per thousand losses on inventory that I hedged. Now I still had the inventory to ship, and so I ended up, you know, making a little bit of money, but I didn't make that $500 per thousand. I gave it up, you know, just to buy insurance. So, I mean, in my life, I've never had a $500 loser.
So
on anything.
Markets move on greed and fear, and in accumulation and distribution. So all the way up to 1,800 or 1,700, we were accumulating, right? Accumulating.
Yep.
Some catalyst sets it off where one person decides we've accumulated too much and it stops. These big yards quit accumulating and start distributing. Well, at some point they have to look at their available inventory on hand and whatever calculation they use with their trailing averages and decide they have to start buying sometime and turn that ship around. And we don't know when that's going to happen, but there are some signs of that starting to pop up a little bit because, you know, like I said, I read that email from that gentleman, and like he said, is look at, I've got business everywhere. There's just some stuff that's slowing the pipeline. And another conversation you and I had on the phone last night was, God, there's some things markets are efficient. So engineered wood products has been tight. That seems to be the tightest item that we're hearing everywhere. Matter of fact, a guy told me that there's trusses sitting out for 4 weeks in job sites and steel and everything because they can't get some of the engineered to build. So they just shift their framing crews over to other places that have plenty of work. But with that said, so what remedies that the engineering, and your mill's a perfect example. You do long lengths, you do other stuff. And so people start figuring out how to use the old traditional methods of the solid sawn to do that. And some of that gets worked through. OSB gets worked through. Doors and windows are still tough. But that all gets worked through. So
you talked about last week, Costco sending out mailers and sales on appliances. I just got an email from Costco. Hey, we're having a huge 4th of July sale. I drive by Home Depot. There's plenty of product out there. So I think a lot of these consumer shortages that we've experienced that in our normal lives, not in lumber, but just, there's some things that have been harder to buy. When we sold our house, the people that bought our house were desperate to buy a washer and dryer. They're like, we have to have it because we can't find one. Well, you can find washer and dryers now 3 months later, and they'll cost you a little bit more, but you can find them. It's like what Greg said all along. He says there's no shortage of lumber. It's just there's a lot of demand for it. You can still buy lumber. Yeah. Well, nothing's changed. You can still buy lumber today. You can just buy it for $900 to $1,000 less than what you could have bought 4 or 5 weeks ago. That's right. And I think these problems will right themselves out over time as our economy sort of gets back to being efficient. One of the things that we have no control over in this country is the shipping problem worldwide. We have a real problem with containers and vessels, and that big vessel that blocked the Panama Canal for a month, that really caused some big hiccups in worldwide shipping. So we will have some disruption in consumer products and even lumber. The Euros aren't coming anymore. They've said, nah, we're not coming in July. We're not going to come in August. Your prices are too cheap and it's too hard to get the stuff over there and it costs too much. And so we'll keep it here in Europe. So that's one side effect that I've noticed here in the last 2 weeks is all the European wood that normally gets offered to me for my purposes. It's barely there. I mean, there's a lot of it that's not going to come here for the next 2 months. That's a good change if you're looking for a reason to buy lumber. There's going to be less whitewood coming in over the next 60 days. I know at our mills and a lot of the mills in the West, they're going to run a heavy diet of Doug fir. There's not going to be a lot of hem fir. There's not going to be a lot of ponderosa pine or whitewood species. Most of the logs that the logging companies want to process because they're easier to cut down and get to the mills are Doug fir. And so you'll see more Doug fir and less hem fir go over the next 60 days. Yeah, that leaves the Canadians as the cheap source of fiber. The Canadians and yellow pine mills are the cheapest 2x4 and 2x6 on the planet. And eventually, as you and I have talked about for years, when spruce is the cheapest thing on the planet, it doesn't stay like that forever, right? It will get bought up by other people at some point. So we're there right now. And now it's just a matter of time before we start to see people recognize all these different things that are happening that have occurred. And they go, yeah, I could buy 10 or 15 cars now. Plus, what about all these job shipper guys that were off sides for the last 8 months? They're in the money now.
Yeah. Well, let's not
a job or something like that. You're now profitable. You were going to lose $800 $1,000, and now you're going to make $200.
Right. One thing I noticed, Matt, the last few days, there's been a lot of lumber traded, right? A lot of lumber has changed hands. So there's been a lot of volume. Now the question is that enough to get prices to, first of all, prices have to stop going down, right? In order to stop going down, mills, which I think have done a great job, they have really done a good job building order file, going out and getting the business and building order file. We see it on our platform, right? Another thing that we saw interesting, you kind of talked about the Pacific Northwest, what's going on there. So OSB is a big one. Well, here's something's interesting. One of the big producers down in the Texas market is doing mostly specialty to catch up on that lag they had a few months ago. So they don't have the commodity board. we were moving commodity board all the way out of the Northeast, out of the Midwest to Florida, Texas, and those areas this week on the platform. Traditional moves that don't happen, right? Some of our OSB moved 1,900 miles.
Right.
Think about that. That's that 1,900 mile haul. That truck is going by other mills that produce OSB, and but it efficiently kind of found itself. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, you and I we saw a lot more traditional buyers selling extra back into here.
You call that.
Yeah. So which is interesting. So I guess after all this talk, we've sold off a lot, right? So and you've kind of showed how your theory of de-risking a trade in a way, and that makes a lot of sense. Now we're going into a long weekend, and long weekends can go both ways, right? It's always interesting. I think after July, I'll have to pull up some of my charts. We normally go into some type of season where there's, at least in whitewoods, there's some type of accumulation historically, right?
I mean like
a little bit, yeah. And you got your traditional summer shutdowns at some of the eastern spruce mills and so forth. And but we'll see. It's always interesting. What's your thought going into the holiday here? I mean, it's only Wednesday. We have 3 days. Are we done for the week? Are we going to see some more buying, or what do you think?
We'll probably see. I mean, I think we'll just see more of the same, which is the mills are reaching out on what they want to sell, and that list has shrunk a little bit, especially on the whitewood species. I think on Doug Fir Dimension, that's still there's more of that available. Those prices ran higher, and those mills had longer order files, and they're still decompressing. Whereas the spruce mills and the Hem-Fir mills and anyone that makes whitewood, pine, or ESLP, I think we've given up so much value already that I just go back to my original statement. I'm willing to take the $200 or $300 risk because I can manage $200, $300 worth of risk pretty easily. I can't manage $1,000 worth of risk. You know, when the price of lumber was $1,500 for number 3 and $1,800 for number 2, I didn't want to buy it. I just didn't. I just had no interest in owning that at all. And I had to buy a little bit of it because you have to run a business still. But I certainly bought the minimum amount necessary to run my business at that price. But now that I've got this reprieve, I'm like, well, you know, I can kind of go back to running my business the old way, you know, with actual a little bit of volume and a little bit of risk management, and I can manage that. That's no problem. And I think everybody that I sell to can manage it also. The other thing that happened was at the beginning of the top. So when Greg said, "Hey, I think we reached the top," was that 5-6 weeks ago? He called it correct. You know, at that time, who had the inventory? And I maintain, and I still maintain that this is true, that most of the inventory was either sitting in a retail yard or on its way to a retail yard or at the mill, waiting to be produced or waiting to be loaded on a car. And there wasn't a lot of wood in the middle. There was some wood at distribution. There was some wood in wholesale hands. But over the last 5 weeks, whatever wood that was out there that was sort of just nebulous floating around, even your arbitrage stuff that people had in their yards, a lot of that got cleaned up. I'd say most of it. I mean, and there wasn't much to begin with, as opposed to 2018, where everybody had a lot of wood, and we had bad weather and all these things that happened, and it didn't help the flow of material at all. Everybody was jammed up. It was like trying to push lead through a garden hose. The lumber wasn't moving.
You said coal last night to me, not lead.
Coal, yeah, coal, lead, whatever. Just you know, whenever you're trying to shove something through a garden hose, it's not really
right. Well,
but you know what I'm saying. I think the market's in a different position today than it was in 2018, and therefore I'm willing again to participate more freely in the buy side of this market than I was 5 weeks ago. A lot more. I mean, it's like, hey, we just got a get out of jail free card. You can buy your lumber for half price now, and it's more in that historical range. It's still a little bit on the high end of that historical range, but it's way below what we were just trading for a month or two ago.
Well, let's size that up for a second, because we always talk about index pricing and actual trade price. So the actual trade price on like a spruce 2x4 9-footer to an area was like 2,000, 1,000, or $12 a stick, right?
Yeah.
Look, some people don't always see the best deals, but 9-foot studs traded in the 850, give or take some this week.
I heard less than 800.
Less than that. Yeah.
I heard
So
790 yesterday delivered to a guy, and I don't know if it's true, but you just hear numbers, right?
all right. So, but if you say so, 790 is $4.74 a stick for a stick that was trading at $12 a stick a month and a half ago. That's the difference in price that we've seen. High trade price, not talking index here. I'm talking the high trade price to low trade price. So, there's some, that's getting back. I saw there was 2x8 Southern Pine on our platform yesterday at $450 a thousand. I haven't seen anything at 450 in 6 months, right? 8 months. Like, I was like, that's just cheap fiber, and from relative to where we've come from. So,
yes. Yeah, but even in the old days, 450 for something never blew anybody away. It doesn't freak you out. I mean, how many cars of lumber did you buy in your career for 450, Ash? Thousands, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, yeah, no doubt. Looking back to the, I think one of the things that's been weighing a lot on this is the boxes probably getting their, pushing back on some stuff, and that certainly has caused that on 8-foot type of studs, treated, which pushes back on the wides and pine and some other stuff. And we'll have to see if that takeout comes back or not. But for right now, that seems to be slowed down from what I see, right? And I'm removed from it. I hear people talking about it from what I see. So we'll see what happens. So what's your thought going into the fourth here? What should people think about? I like what the guy said in the email. Like, hey, I'm stick, and I see the guy buying on our platform every day. He just keeps moving numbers down and keeps buying.
I think if you have business, which we're all still pretty busy, you should do some buying. I mean, that's just my opinion. You should be actively looking to buy lumber right now and name your price, because if you can get out there and front run the rest of the world and make some really good deals, you can still sell a little bit of a premium in the board. I mean, it's not like the board's running a $200 discount. So you can still sell the board a little bit. You can use futures if you want to, but I just go back to the old, hey, if it's 1,100, or let's say, here's the math. Here's just a real quick example. In the end of May, I was being offered 2 before number 3 at $1,500 delivered Texas. I can buy for half price or approximately. Well, if studs 9-footers went from 2,000 at the very peak on somebody panic buying or just had to buy at 2,000, and now they can buy that same item for 800 to 850.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the bottom of all time? No, but it's a hell of a lot closer to 450, 550, which is sort of the historical number, than it was at 2,000. So I'm much more inclined to be engaging on the buy side on whitewood species. I don't have the same feeling about Doug fir yet, because it still has a little bit more room to go. But I think white lumber, whether that's hemp fir, pond pine, ESLP, spruce out of Canada, spruce out of Europe, I think we're forming a bottom right now as we speak. And it might take a week or two for it to fully materialize, but I do expect a rebound. And so that's how I'm operating my business. And if I'm wrong, I can always sell the board and hedge my inventory, and I can manage that at this point.
Here's
and I'm
a
willing
question.
to take that risk, right?
Here's a question, Matt. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it right. Maybe you'll said, do you think the challenges, this is from one of the listeners, do you think the challenges, let me just close my chat window here. Do you think the challenges mills have building an order file is a result of the purchasing is better aligned with the selling? Resellers are still prioritizing replenishment strategy rather than a position buying strategy.
I think the resellers, they're talking about like wholesalers. Are they talking about with resellers, or are they talking about wholesalers?
Well, let's just, I think I'm assuming the same thing you're thinking as wholesale. That's what that's how I'm reading it.
Let me just start with the first part of the question. So the first sentence is, do you think the challenges mills have building an order file as a result of the purchasing is better aligned with the selling? No, I don't. I think that the challenges the mills have building an order file is that the price of lumber just halved or more in a short period of time, like in 4 weeks. And nobody can catch a falling knife like that in our business. I mean, you
And
can't.
Matt, it really accelerated in the last 7 trading days.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't. You can't plan for that. You can. The only thing you could do is back in May, sell out to the middle of July, right? Just have a huge order file. So if you were worried at all about a drop in prices, you know, have a 400, 500 car order file. But mills don't really operate like that. It's not how mills efficiently operate. Most mills can't really look past about 3 weeks accurately. And you know, there's other things that come into play.
That's a great point, Matt. That's one everybody loses sight of, that they sometimes mills can't really accurately look past 3 weeks.
Well, especially mills like ours that run multiple species. So if you're running Doug fir for 2 weeks, then Hem-fir for 2 weeks, you know, the mill managers will make arbitrary decisions without telling the sales office until after the fact. They'll say, hey, we decided to run our next week Doug fir. So if you had Hem-fir orders for the week of, you know, June 21st, and the mill manager decided, hey, we got all these extra Doug fir logs, let's just run 1 more week of Doug fir. Well, every order for week of June 21st or sooner is going to be late. And you don't want to do that. Like, as a sawmill, you want to sell what you're making, right? But the sales companies or the sales arm of these timber companies don't control the mill production. That's not how it works. The mills produce what they want to produce, and then the sales team goes out and sells it.
The mills, and from what I'm hearing, and I've heard this before, and it makes mill managers want to cut for efficiency. They want to cut for the most volume they can push through at that time of what they currently have, right?
The mill managers have a number of different factors to think about: the log size, the log quality, which logs are in what spot in the yard, you know, because sometimes they can't get to a log pile that they need to get to run that particular log, so they have to clear out some other logs. There's just different factors involved. They might have a problem with the kiln and they don't want to run any dry lumber for a week, so they decide to run green for a week. You know, there's things that happen at sawmills that the sales team doesn't have any control over. So the business model is make, sell, right? And the only time that changes is like in 2008 through 2011, when nobody had any orders and the economy was in complete disarray, and we had a housing bubble burst, and we went to 600,000 housing starts. In that moment, we changed our business model to sell, make. But that's not normal, right?
Yeah.
Normal is make, sell. And
Yeah.
the mill manager decides that, and then we sell what the mill produces. Now, they do consult with us because we tell them, hey, this is really good and this isn't so good. You know, there might be a run on long lengths. There might be a treater or a Home Depot type company that wants to come in and buy a bunch of 4x4 for treating purposes. So we'll make adjustments as we go, but it's all done on the fly. And in order to keep all these moving parts together, you can't really go out past 3 weeks accurately, unless you're a stud mill and all you make is 2x4 92 5/8 spruce. You make one species, one item, you can build as long an order file as you want. You can sell 2 months out. But how many mills do you know like that? There's not a lot of mills that just make one species, one item, right?
I don't know too many, but we all heard those stories, which were when we got up to these hot, lofty numbers relative to where they've historically been. I did hear of some actual mills going out and taking firm business because it just made absolute sense, right? But the question is, how much did you actually get on? And then are those mills competing against other people in the risk management side that are willing to do it for a different price, et cetera, and a different type of thing? Because taking those orders forward is always hard because of the way that you have to manage them and ship them to different places, right?
Exactly. And it would be really hard to sell. Let's say if back in May we knew them. Let's just say we knew this. Like we're like, you know, all seeing eye type people. Oh yeah, it's going to go down $1,000. We know it. So we went out and called up our 10 biggest customers and said, hey, we'll sell you two before at like $200 below the top, all the way through the end of August if you want. You know how many orders we would have got? Zero.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody would have bought that, and everybody would have run for the hills and said, we're not buying anything. Hampton's trying to sell us out to 3 months ahead at 200 off the highs. They just get scared. And we're not in that business anyways. It's just not how we trade. It's just not generally how lumber gets traded. I mean, I know there are exceptions, but 99%.
It's interesting, man. So one person just said that explains the OSB and plywood order file. Absolutely right from what you just said, right? Because they're making a widget, right? And they can sell. And James just said, I can confirm that, Ash. I had a number of mills willing to forward price me over the past few months, right?
Right. Yeah, you can do that if you're making one thing. You make one thing over and over and over again, you can put your order file out as far as you want. Now it's just up to you and your factory to produce it, right?
Right.
I think that's been the problem is in OSB and plywood that they took a bunch of orders and then they couldn't catch up to all those orders because too many people wanted to buy at the same time. So they went to an allocation model. They started cutting people's volumes down and said, hey, we've been a great customer for 20 years, but we're going to knock you down to 50% because we just can't supply you any more than that.
Yeah.
The lumber mills didn't do that. They just kept selling lumber and they're still selling lumber. Like the lumber mills just keep pumping it out. And I think there's going to be a little bit less white species lumber. That would be your spruce, your hem fir, your pine, your ESLP. There's going to be definitely less of that in the next 2 months than there was the last 2 months. There'll be a little bit more Doug fir. I can't speak for yellow pine. I've mentioned that several times in here. But generally speaking, going back to my original theory, when spruce and yellow pine are the cheapest things on planet Earth, I'm interested. I want to pay attention.
Matt, little plug for Hampton, man. Like all the moving parts in the mills that you have everywhere in North America and the efficiency of how you communicate between all your mills, species, customers, and your sales floor is pretty amazing. I think you guys have one hell of a team and do a pretty damn good job.
Well, I like it. It's a good company, and I would not ever say anything bad about the Hampton.
It's a great company. It really, you guys, and I've been on your floor before. I've met all your people there, and I've never ran into one person that wasn't like really cool and a great person to work around.
I think they've done a really good job. It's really hard to do what Hampton does well, which is integrate trading, integrate distribution, integrate import export, integrate sawmills and production in different countries. I mean, we have consumption agreements in Asia, like where we're sending product over there and then they're remanning it for us and bringing it back. I mean, there's all kinds of moving parts within the Hampton system. But the one thing I've always said about Hampton is just really well managed.
Yeah.
And so I always praise the people above me for being bright and being good managers. And that's what it takes. That you just have to have really good management to pull it off. And we do, thank goodness. I think it's the Hampton family, really.
Especially when you talk about going through what we did in 2008, 9, 10, and 11 and being able to keep the vessel going into the waves, right?
That was a brutal time period. It was layoffs, there was scaled back hours, mills were just kind of flailing around. What do we do now? I mean, everybody was staring at each other with a blank stare and just going, what happened,
Yeah, no.
And it was brutal.
Hey, well, listen, this is a good conversation. It's 12. We went up against our half an hour. Matt was awesome. I love the part about explaining to people the thought process that goes on at a mill. There's a lot of moving parts. So hopefully everybody learned a little bit here. Like I said, Matt is at Hampton Lumber. If you ever want to contact him, and we've got another show tomorrow with Matt Lehman and I at noon, and then Matt, Greg, and I will be back after the 4th on Wednesday next week at 12 o'clock, and we'll have the whole team back together. But it was a great chat today, Matt.
Hey, Ashley, one more plug for Materials Exchange, and the fact that you're seeing now on your platform all this activity is a good insight and a good reason to promote your company. because it does solve some of the inefficiencies in our business to everybody's benefit. You benefit a little bit, you're building a business. The customer benefits because he needs the product, and then the guy that sold it benefits because he was looking to sell something anyway. So I like it. I'm really rooting for you guys, and I appreciate you having me on here, and I hope everybody watching joins the platform and uses the platform because it's a very good tool, and our industry needs this. We really do.
I appreciate it, Matt. As always, I love your intelligence on it, but I also appreciate you being a great friend and taking the time to do this.
Thanks, buddy. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.